The crimes that truly shock us are the ones that they just defy explanation.
Mm.
The ones where the horror isn't just in the act itself, but in the meticulousness of it all.
Right, the planning.
Exactly. This is a story about a young woman, a devastating personal loss, and a killer who committed a crime so grotesque, so unique in Polish history, that for decades, law enforcement just struggled to even categorize it.
They really did.
We're opening the files on Poland's most haunting unsolved mystery.
January 6, 1999. It's hovering near freezing on the Vistula River in Kraków.
Okay.
A boat captain, a man named Mieczysław, is navigating his tugboat, the Elk, near the Drogi Barrage. And suddenly his propeller just seizes up.
So he figures it's what, a log? Debris.
Exactly. He thinks it's an old fishing net, maybe a submerged log, you know, the usual stuff you find in a busy waterway. So they work to wrestle it free.
And what they pull out of that icy water? Not at all.
Not at all. It's pale, it's rubbery, and it's covered in these fragments of saturated clothing.
Unrecognizable at first.
Completely. But then, as the captain is cleaning away the mud, the water, he sees one single horrifying detail.
What was it?
A human ear.
Oh, God.
And it was pierced. A tiny hole where an earring once sat. This wasn't debris, this was human skin.
And the skin. It had been.
Methodically peeled from a body.
Right.
Removed entirely from the torso, almost like taking off clothes.
But the killer didn't discard it.
No. Instead, he stitched the skin back together. He created this ghastly garment.
The remains belonged to Katarzyna Zowada, a 23-year-old theology student who had vanished 2 months earlier.
Just gone.
Lost to her own private despair, and ultimately to a predator's dark fantasy.
So the police, they eventually zero in on someone.
Years later, yes. A man who lived near the river. His name was Robert Janczewski.
And what was the connection?
He was a loner, deeply disturbed. He had a background in human autopsy work, animal skinning.
Oh, wow.
And he was found visiting Katarzyna's grave. Every single night.
Every night. Maintaining a constant vigil. They found traces of blood in his apartment. And investigators alleged he even documented the killing in a secret diary.
So the evidence, even if it was circumstantial, it seemed overwhelming.
It did. The court convicted him. Life sentence.
But that wasn't the end of it.
Not even close. The whole judicial process was highly secretive. And 6 years after his conviction, an appellate court, they just overturned the verdict.
And released him.
Ordered his immediate release. They said the prosecution had failed to establish guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
So did the real killer, a man with this specific horrifying knowledge, just walk free.
Or was an innocent, disturbed man just caught in a net of suspicion. Wrongfully imprisoned for 7 years.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. And 27 years later, this case remains unsolved. A terrifying scar on the history of Polish law enforcement.
Listen till the end to find out how a single piece of human skin derailed a life, exposed systemic flaws, and left a mother without any closure. Welcome to Whispers of Crime.
Follow Whispers of Crime on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and other podcast platforms for daily updates on every crime, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Whispers of Crime.
So before she became the center of this notorious unsolved crime, Katarzyna Zowada, or Kazia as she was known, she was just a quiet student, someone trying to navigate a really profound grief. What do we know about her life in Kraków back in 1998, just before everything went dark?
Well, Katarzyna Zowada was 23. She was living with her mother, Bogusława, in the Nowa Huta district of Kraków.
And she was a university student.
Yes, studying theology at the prestigious Jagiellonian University. And everyone who knew her, they all described her in a very similar way.
How so?
Quiet, kind, and distinctly introverted. She was sort of a solitary figure at the university.
She kept to herself.
But very much so. She preferred to be alone, really immersing herself in her studies, her interests, which were, surprisingly eclectic for a theology student.
Like what?
She loved bands like the Grateful Dead, and she was really inspired by the whole counterculture ethos you'd find in books like The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test.
So that image, the quiet, introspective student interested in counterculture, it paints a picture of someone who's deeply sensitive.
It does.
But that introspection, it was rooted in something specific, wasn't it? A defining, devastating tragedy that had happened a couple of years earlier.
Yes. A tragedy she absolutely carried the weight of. It was the death of her father in January 1996.
What happened to him?
They were on a hiking expedition together, something they both really cherished. And her father, he slipped. He suffered a severe spinal cord injury.
Oh, no.
While the injury itself wasn't immediately fatal, he died shortly after from complications.
Great.
And Katarzyna, she just internalized the entire event.
She blamed herself.
Completely. She was convinced she was responsible for the accident, for his death.
Yeah.
And this intense, persistent self-blame, it triggered a severe, long-lasting clinical depression.
This wasn't just sadness then.
No, not at all. This was a deep psychological wound that made her exceptionally fragile.
It's just horrifying to think that this deep psychological state might have been what made her a target.
It's a key part of the police theory.
We know that in the months leading up to her disappearance, she started making some pretty big changes. Visible, physical changes.
She did, yes. A radical change in her appearance. Her dark hair was suddenly dyed blonde. She started a very stringent weight loss regimen.
And what did her friends and family think of this?
Well, her friends and mother, they initially clung to the hope that this was a positive thing. You know, a sign of a new romance, maybe a rebirth.
Trying to move past her grief.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the police profilers, looking back with the brutal knowledge of what happened, they theorized something much more sinister.
That this wasn't her choice.
Or at least not entirely her choice. The police theory, which was later echoed by FBI behavioral analysts, was that this transformation was actively encouraged, maybe even dictated by a predator.
Grooming.
A classic case of grooming, they believed. That profound depression and self-isolation, it created a vacuum. A vacuum the killer likely filled with calculated empathy, with attention.
So he would have stalked her first.
Almost certainly. Observing her physical changes, her psychological state, and recognizing she was the perfect, fragile target for a very specific, depraved fantasy. They didn't see the weight loss and the hair dye as Kasia trying to start anew.
They saw it as the killer preparing his victim.
Preparing her to meet the precise physical specifications he needed for the crime he was planning.
November 12th, 1998. The day her life just stops. What was her last confirmed activity?
Katarzyna was scheduled for a 6 p.m. psychotherapy appointment. It was at a psychiatric clinic in Nowa Huta.
And she never showed up.
Never. And for her mother, Bogusława, this was an immediate, terrifying red flag.
Because she'd never missed one before.
Never, under any circumstances. Bogusława was already, hypervigilant because of her daughter's fragile state. She immediately feared catastrophe.
Given the cultural landscape in Kraków in the late 90s, what was her mother's immediate catastrophic fear? What did she think happened?
Bogusława was terrified her daughter had fallen in with one of the occult groups or cults that were a significant, if dark, part of the youth scene in Kraków back then.
So that was a real concern.
A very plausible concern for a vulnerable young woman who was, maybe seeking meaning or just an escape. So when Katarzyna didn't return, Bogusława went straight to the Kraków police to file a missing person report.
And the police reaction to a distraught mother reporting her depressed daughter missing was?
A shocking display of institutional indifference, one that would really haunt the entire investigation for years to come.
What did they do?
The Kraków police dismissed her report almost instantly. They assured her, Katarzyna is an adult, a student. She's probably just a runaway. She'll resurface at some point.
So they just classified it as a low-priority bureaucratic detail.
That's it.
Why? Why the indifference? Why wasn't a depressed, vulnerable young woman considered a priority?
Their resources and their attention were completely diverted. At that exact time, the entire police command was fixated on a huge, high-profile international incident.
The knife attack on the Italian football star, Dino Baggia.
By a local Wisła Kraków supporter. The police were under immense public and political pressure to solve that. It made Katarzyna's personal tragedy seem insignificant in their eyes.
So that initial failure meant the most crucial window in any missing person case.
The first 48 hours.
He was completely wasted.
Completely. And for nearly 2 long months, Bogusława was left totally alone. She hired a private detective, used up every personal resource she had.
Chasing down any lead she could.
Any lead. They followed rumors, a sighting on a bus, anonymous phone calls from a man claiming to know where her daughter was, which the detective wisely told her to ignore.
Just a cruel manipulator.
Probably. Bogusława blanketed the city with missing person notices, just desperately trying to find her daughter while the official police file just sat there, dormant.
It's an unbearable thought. A mother searching alone in the dark for a child the state didn't seem to care about.
And the case stayed cold, officially cold, until 7 weeks later, when that discovery on the Vistula River forced the police to confront a horror they were entirely unprepared for.
Follow Whispers of Crime on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and other podcast platforms for daily updates on every crime, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Whispers of Crime.
So that discovery on January 6, 1999, near the Dobby Barrage, it just completely changed the scope of everything. It went from a missing person inquiry to Poland's most complex and shocking homicide case.
Captain Matiso's find confirmed Bogusił's worst fears in the most barbaric way imaginable.
It did.
So when they realized they had pulled out human skin, I mean, what was the initial reaction? This must have been totally unprecedented.
Absolutely unprecedented. And what they found, you have to understand, wasn't a full body. It wasn't even fragments you'd recognize from a standard dismemberment.
It was the skin.
The skin of a human torso, flayed meticulously, from the neck down to the thighs. It essentially created a complete hollow shell.
The skin suit.
It was quickly dubbed the skin suit by investigators. The presence of the navel, some pubic hair, and that telltale earring hole. It was immediate, horrifying proof of humanity.
Tell us more about the suit itself, the meticulousness, the stitching. What did the initial forensic analysis reveal about how this thing was constructed?
The initial examination was led by a team of highly specialized pathologists, and they determined the skin had been sliced with what they could only describe as surgical precision.
So this wasn't rough butchery.
No, this was expert work done with anatomical knowledge. But the most disturbing detail was the reconstruction. The skin had been sewn back together.
How?
Along an oblique seam running from just beneath the right breast up to the left shoulder. And the experts concluded this stitching was intentional, not for preservation. It was to transform the skin into a singular, specific garment.
And crucially, the nipples had been removed.
Deliberately removed, yes.
That detail, the removal of the nipples and the stitching, it suggests a motive so far beyond simple anger or robbery. It screams of ritual, of psychosexual fantasy.
Precisely. The level of control required for an act like this is just extraordinary. A few days later, on January 14th, police divers recovered more remains.
What else did they find?
A right leg, severed cleanly below the knee, fragments of buttock flesh, and clothing.
And the clothing gave them another chilling insight, didn't it?
It did. They found a checkered shirt, but a precise, square-shaped piece had been surgically cut out of the fabric. Similar precise cuts were on her jeans.
So the killer wasn't just mutilating the body, he was interacting with the evidence in this controlled, almost artistic way.
That's a good way to put it.
And this case also marked a historical moment for Polish law enforcement, right?
It did. It was a landmark case. It was the first time DNA analysis was successfully used for victim identification in Polish criminal history.
And it confirmed the identity.
Unequivocally. The DNA from the skin belonged to Katarzyna Zowada. The technology provided certainty where, physical appearance could provide none.
I assume initially investigators might have thought the tugboat propeller caused all this damage?
They considered it, but it was abandoned very quickly.
Why?
The forensic pathologists ruled it out immediately. The skin was excised, not torn. The analysis showed a very clear sequence of events. Torture, then death, then the highly skilled flaying.
The evidence of torture was undeniable.
Undeniable and horrific. They located 4 distinct puncture wounds on what was left of her body.
4 strategic wounds. Where were they and what was their purpose?
They were placed to prolong her suffering. 1 puncture beneath each armpit and 1 on each inner thigh.
Oh, God.
These locations were chosen specifically to sever major blood vessels. The conclusion was that she wasn't killed quickly. She was subjected to a slow death via exsanguination.
Bleeding out slowly while conscious.
Yes, which required the killer to keep her immobilized, conscious, and controlled throughout the entire ordeal.
The knowledge required to do that, the controlled torture, the precise flaying, that immediately narrowed the suspect pool.
It did. They were looking for a very specific professional profile.
Someone with training.
High-level anatomical training. The pool included surgeons, medical examiners, professional butchers, vets, or even someone with military training in advanced dissection. This wasn't a random act of violence.
It was a performance.
By someone who understood the map of the human body intimately. And if you fast forward years later to 2012, the understanding of this brutality only deepens.
When the case was reopened.
Yes. Her remains were exhumed for a comprehensive modern autopsy at Wrocław Medical University.
And what could they learn nearly 15 years later that they didn't already know?
They applied 3D body scanning, a cutting-edge technique. This confirmed not just the puncture wounds, but multiple impact injuries across the remaining flesh and bone.
And the patterns of those injuries.
They were consistent with someone trained in martial arts.
So you add another chilling layer to the profile.
The killer was not only anatomically knowledgeable, but physically disciplined and skilled in restraining a victim with controlled force. The brutality. It was technical.
So this brutality, the torture, exsanguination, surgical flaying, martial arts, it all suggests this immense, highly controlled rage, channeled by an individual with a terrifyingly specific pathology. How did the FBI and the Polish profilers categorize this person?
The Polish investigation was codenamed Skóra, which means skin. They worked very closely with international profilers, including the FBI.
And what was the consensus?
The profile painted a picture of a male, probably in his 20s or 30s at the time. Profoundly disturbed, yet highly intelligent and organized.
A paradox.
A huge one. They classified him as having severe sadistic psychopathic traits, layered with strong narcissistic features. They figured he was likely socially dysfunctional, living an isolated or marginal life despite his high intelligence.
And the motive. What could possibly be the motive for this?
They identified it as something called equivalent murder.
Equivalent murder, what does that mean?
The theory suggests that the extensive torture inflicted on Katarzyna served as a psychological substitute for sexual intercourse.
So the act of total control and suffering replaced intimacy.
An intimacy he was maybe incapable of achieving or processing, yes.
And the skin suit itself, that unique, grotesque artifact that was linked directly to his core identity confusion.
Absolutely. The removal of the nipples, the construction of the suit into a wearable item, it all strongly suggested profound gender dysphoria.
So he was trying to become her.
Profilers believed he sought to resolve his own deep-seated inadequacy by literally appropriating a woman's identity. He wasn't killing out of hatred for Katarzyna specifically, but out of this desperate narcissistic need to become the thing he could not be by wearing her skin.
It's just beyond comprehension.
Right.
But a profile like this suggests an individual with compulsive tendencies.
Right.
Someone who should, by all statistical standards, repeat this type of sophisticated ritualistic crime.
And yet,
no similar murders occurred in Poland in the decades that followed. How did profilers reconcile that paradox?
that was the key enigma. A killer this ritualistic usually repeats. They came up with a few theories to explain the silence.
Such as?
1, the killer relocated immediately. Maybe to Germany or the UK, where he might have continued his activity unnoticed by Polish authorities. 2, he died shortly after the crime.
Or he was in prison for something else.
Or he was imprisoned for an unrelated, less severe crime. But the darkest, most chilling theory
What was that?
was that the singular, immense act of planning, torturing, and successfully flaying Katarzyna combined with making the skin suit. It provided such a massive and complete psychological catharsis that it satisfied his compulsion entirely,
So he didn't need to do it again.
which would make him incredibly difficult to find. No trail of similar victims.
Now, 5 months after Katarzyna's remains were found, police arrested a man for a completely separate but equally macabre crime.
It was a shocking twist.
It must have created massive confusion in the early investigation.
Oh, it did. In May 1999, Vladimir W., a Russian immigrant and, coincidentally, a fellow student at Jagiellonian University, was arrested.
And what had he done?
He had beheaded his father and then fashioned the facial tissue into a mask, which he wore to deceive his visual-impaired grandfather. The media called him the scalp killer.
The parallels are just undeniable. The shared university, the methodical skinning, the obsessive need to wear the victim's flesh.
As a garment or a mask, yes.
Did investigators think they had their man?
They launched an intensive parallel investigation. They thought the cases had to be connected. The ritualistic similarity was just too profound to ignore.
But they weren't connected.
No. The profiles quickly diverged. Vladimir's motive was revenge against his father for abandonment. It wasn't the specific psychosexual pathology they saw in the Zowada case.
And forensically.
No DNA, no
Yeah.
physical link between Vladimir and Katarzyna. He was ruled out, convicted of his father's murder, served 5 years, and then was deported to Russia.
Which put him beyond the reach of Polish investigators.
Exactly.
To have two such bizarre, highly ritualistic skinning murders in the same city within months of each other, yet be completely unrelated, that's statistically baffling.
It is. And it led them down so many dead ends. They looked into a local stalker and cross-dresser. They even investigated a man who'd killed and skinned his wife and son back in 1985.
But he was ruled out.
By 1998, he was physically incapacitated, confined to a wheelchair.
So by 2001, with no match for the unidentified DNA they found, the investigation just stall.
It stalled completely. The case was formally closed and transferred to the Cold Case Unit, Archive X.
And this is where the story takes a turn from forensic science into, well, into the realm of desperation.
The desperation was real. During that decade, the case sat cold investigators. And this just highlights their profound frustration. They consulted Polish clairvoyants.
Really?
Yes. A man named Krzysztof Jakowski, a well-known figure, offered a cryptic insight. He claimed he picked up on something the police had already found and discarded back in '99.
And did it lead anywhere?
The specific clue is still classified, but his involvement prompted investigators to revisit their old files. It was a clear sign that traditional methods had just utterly failed them.
Don't forget to follow Whispers of Crime on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and other podcast platforms for daily updates on every crime, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Whispers of Crime. Like, share this episode with others who might have information about this case, and help. Also, comment your suggestions below, drop your positive review and rating. Remember to check out our recent released crime case like this. So the case may have been archived, but the need for justice wasn't. In 2012, the Archive X team decides to apply modern forensic techniques to this decades-old evidence. And this proved to be the pivotal decision.
It really was. It began with the exhumation of Katarzyna's remains in 2012. This allowed for a fresh, comprehensive autopsy at Rocco Medical University. We already mentioned the 3D body scanning that revealed those martial arts injuries.
Right.
But the true game changer was the work of forensic botanists.
Botanical evidence, the plant fragments embedded in the remains. This sounds like something out of a crime show.
It does, but its application here was incredibly powerful. It was crucial.
How exactly did this specialized science refocus the investigation?
Well, the forensic botanists, they meticulously analyzed microscopic plant fragments that were found embedded deep within the skin and flesh.
And what did they find?
They identified specific species, and the critical finding was this. These species were not native to the ecology of the Vistula River or the Duby Barrage area where her body was dumped.
So what does that tell you definitively?
It proves that the murder and the flaying did not take place at the riverbank. It meant the entire horrific ordeal. The torture, the exsanguination, the flaying, it all occurred inland.
Somewhere else.
In a very specific, narrow geographical zone within the greater Kraków region. And this instantly gave them a geographical filter for the investigation.
They could disregard hundreds of kilometers of riverbank and focus on properties, cottages, workshops in that specific inland zone.
Precisely.
So after focusing on the Vistula for over a decade, the new evidence is pointing somewhere completely different. But at the same time, they get a new psychological profile update from the FBI.
Yes, in 2014.
And it seems completely at odds with the brutality of the crime.
That 2014 profile update was controversial. The FBI analysts characterized the killer as merely a harmless weirdo.
A harmless weirdo?
Yes, a socially maladjusted, marginal character, a low-level fetishist maybe, but not a hardened, violent sadist.
That clashes spectacularly with the reality of the surgical precision and controlled torture.
It does, and it just highlights how psychological profiling, without that key link of definitive DNA, can sometimes lead investigators astray.
But the breakthrough eventually arrived, not from new tech, but from a human source. In 2017, 19 years after the murder, a tip comes in.
That's right. In October 2017, a woman contacted Archive X, and she provided startling specific details about a 52-year-old car mechanic named Robert Jenselski.
And her information was a perfect storm of circumstantial evidence.
It really was. She revealed that Jenselski had specialized anatomical knowledge, a professional history working with dead bodies, was skilled in skinning animals, lived near the Vistula, and most disturbingly,
he maintained that bizarre obsessive vigil at Katarzyna Zowada's grave.
Exactly.
Let's talk about Jenselski's background. How did he get the anatomical expertise to execute something so precise?
His background was complex. Troubled from childhood, he was abandoned, raised by an abusive grandfather. But his career path gave him the necessary skill set.
How so?
During his military service, he was assigned to a military morgue. He assisted in human autopsies, dissections. He gained firsthand, intimate familiarity with human anatomy and surgical tools.
And his civilian career reinforced this knowledge.
Yes. After the military, he worked at the Kraków Institute of Zoology. His duties included skinning various animals for scientific purposes.
Now, there were some sensational media reports about that job, weren't there?
There were. Initial reports claimed he was fired for killing experimental animals out of sadism, but investigative journalist Monica Gora later refuted this.
What was the real story?
His former supervisor clarified that Jędrzejewski resigned after a disagreement and that the euthanasia and skinning of animals were just standard, controlled practices at the Institute.
So regardless of why he left, the knowledge base was there. The anatomical knowledge and the practical skill of flaying were irrefutably present.
Yes.
But it's the behavior after the murder that really cemented him as the primary suspect. The obsessive behavior at the cemetery. Was this repentance, or was it a killer returning to his trophy?
Profilers debated that intensely. After 1998, Jędrzejewski's behavior transformed. He was known locally as a weirdo and a freak, a known stalker of women, sometimes engaged in cross-dressing.
And then he became religious.
Intensely devout, attending church daily. But his most visible shift was his daily visits to Zowada's grave at Badowicki Cemetery.
Every single night.
Every night. Tending a perpetual candle, sometimes burying letters there. To the police, this ritualistic obsession suggested the killer was psychologically unable to let go of the crime.
Needing to interact with the victim's memory, whether out of remorse
or continued narcissistic control.
Exactly. What else did his neighbors witness that elevated him beyond just being eccentric?
Well, neighbors confirmed his reputation as a stalker and cross-dresser, and investigators learned he was actually on the police radar years earlier. Police had searched his apartment around the year 2000.
And what happened during that search?
His mother was there. She witnessed him shouting, howling, rolling on the floor, hysterically claiming he was innocent, that he'd been set up by high school friends.
So this early extreme reaction, coupled with his background and location, it made him instantly suspicious when the new evidence came to light.
It did, and his location was highly relevant. He lived upstream on the Vistula. The river's current would have naturally carried any remains dumped near his home downstream.
Right, to where the tugboat found the skin suit.
Exactly.
So when they finally conducted the comprehensive search in October 2017, what specific physical evidence did they think they had?
The search was focused heavily on his residence. They found forensic traces of blood in his bathroom.
And they took the whole bathroom apart.
They were so intent on collecting every possible sample, they removed the entire bath and the surrounding frame for analysis. The prosecution also later alleged they seized a secret diary.
The supposed confession.
A diary, which purportedly contained a detailed confessional description of Zowada's murder. But, and this is a critical point, the specific contents of that diary were classified. They were never publicly disclosed, not even during the trial.
So by late 2017, they had their man. The skill, the training, the proximity, the motive, the obsession, the alleged confession, the blood evidence.
Robert Jędrzejewski was arrested, held in pretrial detention. The investigation felt confident they had finally closed the chapter on the skin suit murder.
Don't forget to follow Whispers of Crime on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and other podcast platforms for daily updates on every crime, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Whispers of Crime. Like, share this episode with others who might have information about this case and help. Also, comment your suggestions below, drop your positive review and rating. Remember to check out our recent released crime case like this.
So Jędrzejewski is in pretrial detention for 5 years, 5 agonizing years. And the trial, when it finally starts in February 2020, is hugely anticipated in Poland.
And the prosecution brings, what was it, over 800 pieces of evidence?
Over 800 pieces, all of it largely circumstantial.
And what was their theory of the crime? How did they lay it all out?
Their theory was meticulous and just, horrifying. They argued Jędrzejewski lured Katarzyna to a remote cottage on the outskirts of Kraków.
In that geographical zone the botanists had identified.
Exactly. They said he likely promised her something, romantic or comforting. And once there, he executed the torture ritual, inflicted the sanguination wounds to prolong her suffering before starting the methodical flaying.
And the skin suit. What did the prosecution argue was his intent for that?
They stuck strictly to the psychological profile. Jędrzejewski intended to wear the skin suit to fulfill his gender dysphoria fantasy.
But it didn't work.
No. They concluded the attempt failed. Because of his short, stocky frame, he's a bodybuilder. The suit just didn't fit him. Frustrated, he kept the garment as a trophy for a while before finally dumping it in the Vistula.
Despite the overwhelming quantity of circumstantial evidence, the trial process itself was deeply flawed.
Deeply.
The proceedings were held entirely behind closed doors.
And this is maybe the most problematic part of the whole judicial saga.
Yeah.
The trial was conducted zwyczajnie małżeńczy with the exclusion of publicity.
Meaning no public access, no press.
Zero. And even more critically, the court's official, Written justification for its verdict was withheld from public release. This total lack of transparency on a case this high profile, it immediately eroded public confidence.
When the judiciary operates in total darkness on a case this grotesque, what vital safeguard is lost for everyone involved? How did that secrecy lead to the reversal?
What's lost is the democratic function of justice. Transparency ensures that the burden of proof, guilt beyond reasonable doubt, is rigorously and publicly tested.
But when it's secret,
The defense can't leverage public knowledge. The press can't scrutinize the evidentiary gaps. Scholars can't review the reasoning. This secrecy allowed the prosecution to present 800 pieces of circumstantial evidence without the intense public scrutiny that might have highlighted its weaknesses.
especially regarding the classified diary and the blood traces.
Especially those. Nevertheless, based on the totality of the case, Robert Jędrzejewski was found guilty of aggravated murder with particular cruelty on September 14, 2022.
And sentenced to life.
Life imprisonment, no possibility of parole.
It must have felt like justice for Bogusawa after nearly 25 years. But the doubts raised by that secret trial, they quickly found an outlet.
They did. In 2023, the investigative journalist Monica Gora published her book, Cryptomim Scora Codename, Skin. And Gora conducted this systematic, devastating critique of the prosecution's case,
Arguing he might be innocent.
forcefully arguing he might be innocent, a victim of investigative tunnel vision.
What were her most critical findings that challenged the entire foundation of that conviction?
She just systematically dismantled the circumstantial pillars. First, the witness testimony. A key witness who identified Jędrzejewski as a suspicious character based their testimony on a highly reconstructed memory from when they were only 7 years old.
Decades before the trial.
Exactly. It raised serious concerns about reliability.
She also corrected the public record on his professional history, didn't she? The narrative of him being a sadistic animal killer was crucial for the prosecution's profile.
Yes, she definitively debunked that media myth. She got testimony from his former supervisor confirming Jędrzejewski resigned voluntarily and that the euthanasia of animals was just a routine, authorized professional task.
So that removed a significant piece of the sadistic psychopathic profile.
A huge piece. Furthermore, Gora highlighted the critical gaps in the DNA evidence. Yes, blood traces were found in his bathroom, but the analysis could not conclusively prove the blood belonged to Katarzyna Zowada.
Or even when it was deposited.
Right. It could have been animal blood or old, unrelated human blood.
And what about the classified diary? The supposed confession?
That was her biggest target. Because it was classified and never released, Gora argued its evidentiary weight might have been dramatically overstated by the prosecution. The secrecy prevented any critical determination of whether it was a real confession, a fantasy, or just the writings of a disturbed man.
Her conclusion was that there was no definitive physical proof.
None.
And that systematic challenge clearly resonated with the appellate court. Just 2 years after his life sentence, the entire verdict was thrown out.
On October 31st, 2024, the Court of Appeal in Kraków overturned the conviction and ordered Jędrzejewski's immediate release. The decision was based on a bedrock principle of law, in dubio pro reo.
Explain the weight of that principle in dubio pro reo in this context.
It translates to the benefit of doubt must accrue to the defendant. The appellate court acknowledged the sheer volume of circumstantial evidence, 800 pieces. It made Jędrzejewski a prime suspect.
But suspicion isn't proof.
Exactly. The court found that suspicion, however intense, does not constitute legal proof. The absence of definitive, uncontested evidence, a solid DNA link, a verifiable confession, meant that reasonable doubt persisted.
So the prosecution just failed to meet the standard.
Legally, yes. And so Jędrzejewski, after 7 years of detention and 2 years of a life sentence, was officially declared innocent in the eyes of the law.
And this is the agonizing conclusion of the Zowada case today. Robert Jędrzejewski, a man who fit the killer's profile with terrifying specificity, who obsessed over the victim's grave, is now legally free.
And Katarzyna Zowada's murder is officially unsolved nearly 27 years later.
The fallout from this acquittal has been immediate and profound.
It has. First, no alternative investigation was launched by authorities after his release. The system just defaulted, left the case in limbo. Second, the financial cost of this failed prosecution was immense. Over 4 million PLN spent on an investigation that resulted in an overturned conviction.
And Jędrzejewski, having spent 7 years detained under the shadow of Poland's most grotesque crime, is now seeking massive compensation from the state.
His legal team filed a claim for 22.5 million PLN. That's about $6 million US.
And the claim covers everything.
Everything. Wrongful arrest, detention, the immense psychological trauma his lawyers described as hell. They cite his placement in cells for dangerous prisoners, the deprivation of family contact, arguing the systemic failures caused catastrophic emotional damage.
So the ultimate question remains, was Jędrzejewski the killer, and did legal technicalities just allow him to walk free?
Or was he a disturbed eccentric who became the easy target of investigative tunnel vision because he fit a disturbing but ultimately inaccurate profile?
The uncertainty is the tragedy.
It is. The initial profile suggested a compulsive killer, yet the silence after 1999 is still the case's greatest enigma, which compels us to revisit the alternative theories.
The most enduring one, the one that haunts the public imagination, is the connection to pop culture.
The copycat theory. The link to the 1991 film Silence of the Lambs is just undeniable.
Buffalo Bill.
The fictional killer, Buffalo Bill, skins his victims to create a female skin suit. The name Kate is so similar to Katarzyna. The murder happened 7 years after the film's release. Ample time for a disturbed individual to assimilate that macabre template.
But if he was inspired by the film, why stop?
That's the question. Serial killers motivated by media templates rarely stop after one successful act, which leads many experts back to the accident third-party discovery theory.
Explain that one.
A forensic pathologist noted post-traumatic stretch marks on Katarzyna's skin. While that doesn't rule out direct trauma, it can also be consistent with rapid deceleration, being thrown from a vehicle or a fall from a height.
So under this theory, she might have died accidentally, or in a crime unrelated to the skinning, and then a third party discovered the body.
Exactly. A highly disturbed individual with anatomical knowledge, a doctor, a morgue worker, a skilled butcher, could have opportunistically discovered the body.
And then acted out their fantasy.
Driven by psychopathic impulse, they performed this act of macabre fantasy on a body that was already deceased. It would explain the surgical precision, the extreme ritual, and the subsequent lack of repeat murders. It was a singular macabre opportunity.
Whatever the truth is, the core systemic failures here are just so clear. This case stands as a profound lesson in how investigative zeal, even with groundbreaking forensic tech, can lead to devastating judicial errors.
The initial administrative negligence, the failure to prioritize her missing person report, that was a catastrophic error that gave the killer weeks of crucial lead time.
And the reliance on circumstantial evidence was perilous without definitive DNA.
And the secrecy of the trial amplified those flaws. By conducting the entire proceeding behind closed doors, the court deprived the process of necessary oversight, allowing questionable evidence, like the classified diary, to stand unchallenged until the appeal.
So the ultimate outcome is a crisis of confidence. We are left with two equally terrifying possibilities.
Either an innocent, disturbed man was stripped of 7 years of his life and is now suing the state for millions.
Or the killer, a unique, methodical sadist with intimate anatomical knowledge, remains free, perhaps living anonymously among us.
The legal system has rendered its decision on Jędrzejewski, but the horrifying reality of Katarzyna Zowada's torture and death remains a dark, unresolved chapter in Poland's history.
And her mother, Bogusława, nearly 3 decades on, still waits for the final, unassailable truth.
Don't forget to follow Whispers of Crime on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and other podcast platforms for daily updates on every crime, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Whispers of Crime. Like, share this episode with others who might have information about this case and help. Also, comment your suggestions below. Drop your positive review and rating. Remember to check out our recent released crime cases like this.